there are numerous American companies in the tech field and textiles who frankly either want to pretend like this problem doesn't exist because they benefit from it or are slow to get to it or what have you. For example, I've repeatedly written and notified Thermo Fisher Scientific that their technology is being used by Chinese law enforcement to build a DNA database of Uyghurs. And despite that, I mean, all evidence is that they continue to provide these products which enable these human rights abuses. So in your research, I mean, it's well documented that Thermo Fisher continues to do this and doesn't care. The question is, in your research, what other companies do you believe are enabling these atrocities that we've seen?
We've written, Senator Rubio, thanks for the question, primarily about Thermo Fisher and its sale of DNA sequencers to the Xinjiang Public Security Bureau at the same time that entity, along with the regional government, was carrying out a program called Physicals for All, and under the guise of a free healthcare program was gathering DNA samples to which the recipients couldn't really say no. And we too wrote repeatedly to Thermo Fisher asking what protections it had in place. And to be clear, we were never able to specifically show that Thermo Fisher sequencers were used in that campaign, but that they were being sold at this same time and wouldn't answer key questions. I think the bigger issue that it flags up, and part of the reason we're enthusiastic about the Speech Act, was that it wasn't illegal then or now for Thermo Fisher to sell that kind of technology. And part of our discussion with them was about the very idea that that technology could be used for gross human rights violations. And I think the Speech Act is very strong in suggesting that all different kinds of technologies that lots of American companies sell to China, for surveillance or other kinds of technology purposes, could be used for appalling human rights violations. And there's no effective, quick check on that to try to, as you know better than I do, effectively export control a single technology takes years. So there has to be some kind of upfront scrutiny of companies that are making lots of money contributing to a highly repressive environment.
Well, some people would hear this and say, okay, it's terrible, but who cares? I mean, what's so dangerous about collecting the DNA of people? And you've talked about some of the grotesque human rights violations. I could certainly speculate about the ability to design. I mean, stuff sounds like science fiction. It really isn't. The ability to design bioweapons and biomaterial that target people of a certain genetic makeup but spare people of a different genetic makeup. Look, there's advantages to having DNA data because it allows you a huge advantage in terms of testing for biomedicine, and then there are nefarious uses of it. When you talk about the grotesque human rights violations that could potentially result from collecting this DNA, are there any sort of specific things you have in mind that we suspect they could use it for, have been used for in the past, based on what we understand about scientific advances could be used? What exactly is the threat of this DNA collection so that people better understand?
Well, even before the DNA is actually used for any purpose, the fact that it's collected coercively in an environment where there are no effective privacy rights and really no means of recourse. We associate ourselves with the UN expert who described Xinjiang as a rights-free zone. But what we have documented authorities doing is building DNA databases to be able not just to employ it for some of the purposes you've described, but to be able to identify the relationships between people. So that if, for example, the authorities want to find person A for whatever reason, and they know that person A is related through a DNA search to person B, and they can find person B and lean on that person to find person A, it gives them that much more power to be able to control a population and surveil it. But we're also extremely concerned about all sorts of genotyping, about facial recognition, and how this DNA is sold and used for medical and other scientific research purposes in an environment where there are no controls on this, none.